The most dangerous truth about spiritual awakening isn't that it changes you. It's that it forces you to quit everything that isn't you, often leaving you feeling like a stranger to your own life. If you're among the 1% of seekers experiencing this slow, involuntary shedding of who you thought you were, this is your psychological roadmap through the wilderness. In the next 50 minutes, you'll understand why your soul is rejecting patterns that once felt essential, and how to navigate this transformation without losing yourself in isolation. What we call spiritual awakening is actually a process of psychological rebellion. Your authentic self, what Carl Jung called the individuated self, begins rejecting anything that isn't genuinely you. This creates what Jung observed as the night sea journey, a period where everything familiar becomes foreign, everything comfortable becomes constraining. The problem isn't the awakening itself, but the psychological and social price that comes with it. As your inner authority emerges, you become incompatible with external validation systems. As your authentic nature surfaces, performed behaviors become physically uncomfortable. As your shadow integrates, you can no longer project your disowned parts onto others. This transformation is dangerous because it happens slowly, often without conscious awareness, leaving you feeling isolated from a world that still operates on patterns you're unconsciously rejecting. Jung documented this process across thousands of patients, the gradual but inevitable quitting of everything that served the ego's survival but betrays the soul's truth. Understanding this process isn't just academic, it's essential for navigating the most profound transformation a human being can experience without losing your sanity or your connections to the world around you. Nancy, a 30-year-old marketing executive, first noticed something shifting during a team meeting about a campaign she'd normally champion. As her boss outlined the strategy manipulating consumer insecurities to drive sales, she felt her stomach clench. Not anxiety, revulsion. The conference room's fluorescent lights suddenly felt harsh against her skin. She watched her colleagues nodding enthusiastically, and their faces seemed almost theatrical, like actors who'd forgotten they were performing. She tried to engage, opening her mouth to offer her usual strategic insights, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she felt what she later described as "my soul" hitting an emergency brake. Her hands began trembling slightly. The meeting continued around her, but she felt like she was watching from behind glass. That evening, she sat in her pristine apartment, every piece carefully curated for Instagram, and felt like she was visiting someone else's life. The motivational books on her shelf, the vision board above her desk, the supplements promising optimization. Everything felt foreign. Not wrong, exactly, just not hers anymore. Over the following months, this pattern intensified. Networking events left her drained rather than energized. Her morning routine of affirmations felt hollow. Even her closest friendships built around shared ambitions and competitive success began feeling performative. She wasn't depressed. She was, as Jung would recognize, beginning to individuate. The turning point came 6 months later, when she realized she hadn't posted on social media in weeks, not from a conscious decision, but from a complete loss of interest in the validation it provided. "I didn't quit seeking approval," she told her therapist. "Approval quit me. My body just couldn't participate anymore." Jung identified 3 core psychological mechanisms driving this unconscious quitting process, each representing a fundamental shift in how the psyche organizes itself around authenticity rather than survival. First, shadow integration. As you reclaim disowned parts of yourself, you can no longer project them onto others or use external systems to manage them. When Nancy could no longer judge her colleagues for being fake, she had to face her own performative patterns. The shadow, Jung explained, contains not just our rejected negative traits, but also our disowned positive qualities, the parts of ourselves we've deemed too risky, too vulnerable, or too authentic to express safely. As these shadow elements integrate external validation systems, become insufficient, because you're no longer split off from essential parts of yourself. Second, ego self. Axis realignment. Your ego begins serving your authentic self rather than social expectations, creating what Jung called conscious participation in your own life. Nancy's ego, which had spent years perfecting the art of manipulation through marketing, could no longer operate in service of something herself found abhorrent. This isn't moral judgment, but psychological impossibility when the ego self-axis realigns you. Literally cannot participate in activities that violate your core nature. Jung observed this as the emergence of what he called ethical instinct, not following external moral codes, but being unable to act against your deepest nature. Third, psychological container. Expansion. Your capacity to hold paradox and complexity increases, making simple external solutions insufficient. Nancy needed more than career success. She needed meaning that aligned with her values, work that honored rather than exploited human psychology, and relationships that supported growth rather than maintaining comfortable illusions. This process manifests in 4 distinct types that Jung observed across decades of clinical practice. Type 1. The approval. Quitters unconsciously develop what Jung observed as validation allergies. Their nervous system begins rejecting situations, requiring performance for acceptance. They might find themselves unable to laugh at jokes they don't find funny, their body refusing to participate in the social contract of false agreement. Unable to nod along with opinions that contradict their inner knowing, they develop what appears to be social awkwardness, but is actually psychological integrity. Nancy experienced this when she could no longer pretend to be excited about client projects that felt meaningless, her enthusiasm simply disappearing despite her mental efforts to generate it. Type 2. The specialness releasers, after initial spiritual inflation, slowly quit needing to be seen as more conscious, enlightened, or special than others. This isn't humility in the traditional sense. It's the recognition that true uniqueness emerges naturally when you stop performing it. Jung noticed that people in this phase often go through a period he called ordinary transcendence, where they become more extraordinary by embracing their ordinariness. They stop needing others to know about their meditation practice, their spiritual insights, or their consciousness level. Nancy went through this when she stopped mentioning her therapy work to colleagues, not from shame, but from a complete lack of need for them to understand her inner journey. Type 3. The certainty. Surrenderers find their need for solid answers dissolving into comfort with mystery. Where they once collected beliefs like armor against uncertainty, they now rest in what Jung called the cloud of unknowing. This terrifies the rational mind, which has spent a lifetime building philosophical and spiritual frameworks for security. Nancy experienced this as her carefully constructed worldview, combining positive psychology manifestation principles and strategic goal setting, crumbled into questions she couldn't answer, and mysteries she no longer needed to solve. Type 4. The blame transcenders gradually quit the victim-perpetrator narrative, not by denying harm, but by recognizing their unconscious participation in their own patterns, reclaiming their power as authors of their experience. This involves seeing how they unconsciously chose situations that would wound them in exactly the ways they needed for their growth, a recognition that's both liberating and terrifying. Jung observed that when you develop genuine psychological sight through this process of Carl Jung shadow work, you become what he called the mirror others are afraid to face. Not because you judge, but because your presence reflects back their own disowned authenticity. People begin feeling uncomfortable around you without knowing why. Your simple presence challenges their unconscious patterns, not through confrontation, but through your refusal to participate in collective illusions. This is why the individuation process often leads to temporary isolation. You become a walking reminder of the authenticity others have sacrificed for social acceptance. The first major risk of this awakening process is disrupting group unconscious dynamics, a phenomenon Jung observed could destroy relationships, careers, and social standing if not navigated consciously. As you quit participating in collective illusions, you become what systems theory calls a change agent, someone whose mere presence destabilizes established patterns. Family systems that depend on your people-pleasing role will experience what Jung termed psychological entropy when you stop performing your assigned function. Nancy experienced this when her family's annual holiday gathering, which had always centered around everyone complaining about their lives, while she provided optimistic reframes, became awkward when she stopped participating in the familiar drama. Her mother, confused by Nancy's lack of rescuing behavior, actually said, "You're being selfish by not helping us feel better." Professional environments built on performance and competition will marginalize your authenticity because it threatens the collective agreement to prioritize results over humanity. Nancy found herself excluded from strategy meetings after she began asking questions about the ethical implications of their campaigns. Her colleagues didn't consciously reject her ideas, they simply felt uncomfortable with her presence, as if she were asking them to examine something they preferred to leave unconscious. Social circles bonded through complaint, gossip, or superiority will exclude your presence because you're no longer feeding the psychological dynamics that hold the group together. Jung observed that most social bonding happens through shared projections. Groups stay cohesive by agreeing on who to blame, what to fear, or whom to consider inferior. The countermeasure Jung developed is what he called conscious participation, engaging with groups while maintaining inner authority. This requires what he termed holding the tension between your authentic self and social requirements. Practice the 3-breath rule. Before entering group situations, take 3 conscious breaths to anchor in your authentic self, feeling your feet on the ground and your breath moving through your body. Then participate without sacrificing your center. You can engage in small talk without losing your depth, recognizing that surface conversation serves social bonding functions without requiring you to abandon your inner truth. You can attend work meetings without betraying your values by finding aspects of projects that align with your integrity, focusing your energy there while maintaining professional boundaries around activities that violate your core nature. You can maintain family relationships without returning to old performative roles by offering presence without rescuing love, without enabling, and authenticity without preaching. The second risk is existential isolation and spiritual superiority, what Jung called the inflated consciousness trap. The clarity that comes with Carl Jung's shadow work can create profound loneliness because you begin seeing through illusions that others still find comforting. You recognize manipulation in advertising performance in social media, projection in political discourse, and unconsciousness in daily interactions. This can lead to what Jung warned against: spiritual inflation, where you unconsciously position yourself as more conscious than others. Nancy fell into this trap, temporarily believing her colleagues were just unconscious while she was awakening. She began feeling sorry for people who seemed trapped in materialism, judging those who still sought external validation, and feeling frustrated with friends who hadn't begun their inner work. Jung observed that spiritual inflation often masks deep fear of intimacy and genuine human connection. When you position yourself as more conscious, you protect yourself from the vulnerability of being seen in your own unconsciousness, your own struggles, your own very human needs and desires. The countermeasure is practicing humanity mirror work. Daily, recognizing one way you're still unconscious still growing, still beautifully human. Keep a weekly journal of your own patterns, projections, and moments of unconsciousness. Note when you judge others for traits you also possess, when you feel superior to those who are struggling with issues you've worked through, or when you use spiritual concepts to distance yourself from human experience. This prevents the ego from using spiritual insights to create a new form of specialness. Remember that consciousness is not a permanent state, but a moment-by-moment choice, and everyone is perfectly placed in their own awakening journey. Jung emphasized that the goal isn't to become permanently conscious, but to develop the capacity for consciousness when it's needed. Even the most individuated people have moments of unconsciousness, projection, and ego-driven behavior. The difference is their ability to recognize these moments and return to consciousness rather than defending their unconscious positions. The third risk is dissolving ego boundaries without healthy self-structure, leading to what Jung called psychological inflation through deflation. As you quit ego-driven patterns, there's danger of losing necessary psychological boundaries that allow you to function effectively in practical reality. You might become overwhelmed by others' emotions, unable to maintain healthy limits, or lose the ability to make decisions and take action. Nancy experienced this when she became so sensitive to others' energy that grocery shopping became overwhelming. She could feel the cashier's depression, the anxiety of other shoppers, and the collective stress of the store environment all at once. She began avoiding public places not from fear, but from energetic overwhelm. Jung distinguished between healthy ego dissolution, which leads to greater consciousness and connection, and pathological boundary dissolution, which leads to chaos and dysfunction. The countermeasure is building what Jung called conscious ego strength, maintaining psychological boundaries, not from fear, but from wisdom. Daily practice includes spending 10 minutes identifying what belongs to you versus what belongs to others. Notice when you're absorbing someone else's emotions, taking responsibility for others' choices, or losing your center in others' energy fields. Create physical and energetic boundaries through breath work, visualization, and conscious separation practices. Maintain what Jung called holding the tension, being open without merging compassionate, without absorbing, and present without losing yourself. This allows you to remain sensitive and conscious while maintaining your psychological integrity and practical effectiveness. Jung observed that truly individuated people develop what he called permeable but stable boundaries. They can let in what serves growth and connection while filtering out what would overwhelm or diminish their capacity to serve. They become like skilled musicians who can hear every note in an orchestra without losing track of their own instrument's part. The first pattern spiritual people unconsciously quit is the desperate hunger for approval. But this happens in stages that Jung meticulously documented. Initially, you quit seeking approval from strangers. You stop dressing to impress people you'll never see again. Stop posting on social media for likes from acquaintances. Stop modifying your opinions in casual conversations to gain acceptance from people whose approval ultimately doesn't matter to you. Nancy noticed this when she stopped checking how many people liked her LinkedIn posts, genuinely forgetting to look, rather than forcing herself not to care. Then you quit seeking approval from professional circles. You stop volunteering for projects solely to gain recognition. Stop agreeing with bosses to advance your career when their decisions contradict your values. Stop networking events where the entire purpose is impression management rather than genuine connection. The next stage involves quitting approval, seeking from friends, which often feels more threatening because these relationships feel more meaningful. You stop laughing at jokes you don't find funny. Stop agreeing with plans that don't genuinely interest you. Stop pretending to enjoy activities that drain you rather than energize you. Nancy experienced this when she could no longer pretend to enjoy the monthly, whine and complain sessions with her college friends, where they'd spend hours talking about how awful their jobs, relationships, and lives were, without any intention of changing anything. Her body simply wouldn't participate in the familiar ritual of bonding through shared victimhood. Finally, and most difficultly, you quit seeking approval from family members, which challenges the deepest conditioning patterns. You stop performing the role your family assigned you, the successful one, the responsible one, the cheerful one, the one who holds everyone together. You stop automatically agreeing with family values that contradict your own emerging truth. Nancy's family had always seen her as the strong one, who had everything together. So when she began sharing her struggles and uncertainties, they became uncomfortable and tried to push her back into the familiar role of having all the answers. Jung observed that family systems have the strongest investment in keeping members in their assigned roles, because family identity often depends on these stable patterns. The second pattern is quitting the need to be special, which Jung recognized as one of the most challenging releases, because specialness often feels like protection against ordinary human vulnerability. Early spiritual experiences often create what Jung called inflation through transcendence. You touch something vast and assume you're more evolved than others who haven't had similar experiences. Nancy went through a phase where she believed her psychological insights made her more conscious than people who hadn't done therapy or inner work. She'd listen to colleagues talk about their problems and internally feel superior for having worked through similar issues, not recognizing that consciousness is an ongoing process rather than a permanent achievement. Jung observed that the need to be special serves several psychological functions. It protects against feeling ordinary or insignificant. It provides identity when you don't know who you are without achievements or recognition. And it creates distance from others to avoid the vulnerability of genuine intimacy. As spiritual maturity develops, you begin recognizing that true uniqueness emerges naturally when you stop performing it. You become fascinating by embracing your ordinariness, extraordinary, by being genuinely human and special, by no longer needing to be special. Nancy described the relief. I spent so much energy trying to be impressive that I had no energy left to be myself. When I quit trying to be special, I discovered I was already unique in ways I'd never noticed. The third pattern is quitting the performance of happiness, which Jung identified as particularly prevalent in American culture, with its emphasis on positive thinking and emotional management. This isn't about becoming negative, but about embracing emotional authenticity and the full spectrum of human experience. Jung observed that genuine spiritual development doesn't make people perpetually happy. It makes them perpetually real. Nancy had built much of her identity around being the positive one, who could reframe any situation, find the silver lining in every problem, and inspire others with her optimistic outlook. When her spiritual awakening began, she found herself unable to perform this positivity when she genuinely felt sad, angry, or confused. The performance of happiness serves to manage others' emotions. We stay positive so others don't have to deal with our authentic feelings and to maintain our own sense of control over circumstances that are actually beyond our control. Jung noted that forced positivity often masks what he called shadow emotions, the anger, grief, fear, and disappointment that are natural responses to life's difficulties. As you mature spiritually, you develop what Jung termed emotional authenticity, the ability to feel and express the full range of human emotions without being overwhelmed by them or using them to manipulate others. Nancy described the transition. I thought being spiritual meant being happy all the time. Now I realize it means being real all the time. I can feel sad without being depressed, angry without being destructive, afraid without being paralyzed. I'm not performing happiness anymore. I'm experiencing the joy that comes from being authentically myself, whatever that looks like in each moment. Phase 1 focuses on conscious discernment during your first 30 days of intentional practice, and Jung emphasized this as the foundation for all further psychological development. Your primary task is distinguishing what's authentically yours versus what you've absorbed from others' expectations, projections, and needs. Jung observed that most people carry others' unlived lives as their own identity. The career ambitions that belong to parents, the relationship patterns absorbed from early family dynamics, the emotional reactions that mirror siblings or friends rather than emerging from your own authentic responses. Nancy discovered that her drive for professional success was largely her father's unfulfilled dreams of corporate achievement, carried unconsciously as her own ambition. Her social anxiety wasn't her natural temperament, but absorbed from her mother's fears about social acceptance and belonging. The daily practice involves spending 15 minutes each morning in what Jung called psychological archaeology, digging through the layers of conditioning to discover your authentic self beneath. Ask yourself, what am I feeling that's actually mine versus what I'm absorbing from others around me? What thoughts arise from my center versus my conditioning? What desires emerge from my authentic self versus my programmed self? Notice the difference in bodily sensation between authentic feelings and absorbed emotions. Authentic emotions tend to feel clear and energizing, even when difficult, while absorbed emotions feel muddy, draining, or somehow foreign to your system. Create what Jung called a differentiation journal, tracking moments when you feel most yourself versus most performative. Note the physical sensations, emotional tones, and mental clarity that accompany authentic moments versus performed ones. Nancy discovered that authentic moments felt solid in her body, grounded, present, and energized, while performed moments felt hollow or floaty, disconnected from her physical center. This practice develops what Jung called inner discrimination, the ability to distinguish between ego-driven impulses and self-directed actions, between conditioned responses and authentic choices. During this phase, pay particular attention to what Jung termed psychological contamination, moments when you absorb others' emotions, thoughts, or energy as your own. Notice when you enter a room feeling fine and leave feeling anxious, angry, or depressed without any clear cause. Practice what Jung called conscious cleansing. After interactions, spend a few minutes breathing consciously and returning to your own emotional center. This isn't about avoiding others' feelings, but about maintaining clear boundaries between what belongs to you and what belongs to others. Phase 2 involves shadow integration. Through Carl Jung's shadow work during days 31 through 90, and Jung considered this the most crucial aspect of individuation. The shadow contains not just what you've rejected about yourself, but what you've projected onto others, disowned for survival, or deemed too dangerous to express. Jung discovered that everything you strongly dislike in others contains some aspect of your disowned self. The traits you've rejected in yourself appear magnified and distorted in others, creating what he called projection screens for your own unconscious material. Nancy realized her intense judgment of fake people reflected her own suppressed authenticity. She criticized others for being performative because she'd spent years hiding her own true feelings and thoughts. Her irritation with needy colleagues mirrored her own unmet dependency needs, which she'd learned to hide after childhood experiences of being criticized for needing too much attention or support. Jung emphasized that shadow work isn't about becoming these rejected traits, but about integrating them consciously, so they serve your growth rather than undermining it unconsciously. The weekly ritual involves what Jung called projection reclaiming, listing 3 traits you judge most harshly in others, then finding 3 specific examples of how each trait exists within you, perhaps in different forms, but definitely present. Write these discoveries without judgment, recognizing Jung's insight that everything unconscious is projected. For example, if you judge others for being selfish, find 3 ways you're selfish. Perhaps you're selfish with your time, your emotional energy, or your attention. If you criticize others for being dramatic, notice 3 ways you create drama. Perhaps through internal catastrophizing, relationship conflicts, or emotional intensity you haven't acknowledged. The monthly integration practice involves choosing one shadow aspect to consciously integrate. If you judge others' neediness, practice expressing your own needs appropriately. Ask for help when you need it. Communicate your emotional needs clearly. Allow yourself to receive support without shame. If you criticize others' anger, find healthy expressions for your own suppressed rage. Physical exercise, creative expression, assertive communication, or therapeutic work with anger. Jung emphasized that integration, not elimination, is the goal. You're not trying to get rid of these traits, but to express them consciously, rather than unconsciously constructively, rather than destructively. This phase also involves what Jung called shadow dialogue, actively conversing with the parts of yourself you've rejected. Nancy began having internal conversations with her selfish side, asking what it needed and how it could be honored without harming others. She discovered that her suppressed selfishness actually contained healthy self-care impulses that she'd rejected because her family had labeled any self-focus as selfish. Through conscious integration, she learned to honor her needs without guilt while remaining considerate of others. Phase 3 centers on conscious participation and authentic engagement during days 91 through 120, which Jung considered the practical application of individuation in daily life. This phase focuses on what Jung called holding the tension, maintaining your authentic center while engaging with others who may still be unconscious of their patterns. The challenge is neither withdrawing from unconscious people nor losing yourself in their energy, but finding a middle path that allows for genuine connection without compromising your integrity. Create your psychological container using Jung's 5-step framework for authentic interaction. First, ground yourself by connecting with your authentic center before engaging. Feel your feet on the floor, notice your breath, sense your physical boundaries, and remind yourself of your core values and intentions. Second, observe the group's unconscious patterns without judgment. Notice the roles people are playing, the emotions being avoided, the projections being exchanged, the ways the group maintains its identity through shared illusions. Third, participate authentically without performing or withdrawing. Speak your truth when appropriate. Maintain your energy boundaries, contribute to the group's well-being without sacrificing your own. Engage genuinely without trying to fix or change others. Fourth, protect your energy and truth with healthy boundaries. This might mean limiting conversation topics that drain you, taking breaks when you feel overwhelmed, avoiding situations that require you to betray your values, or maintaining physical and energetic space when needed. Jung observed that conscious people often need more solitude than unconscious people because consciousness requires energy, and unconscious interactions can be depleting when not managed skillfully. Fifth, integrate afterward by processing what you learned about yourself. Notice what triggered you, what you projected, what you absorbed from others, how you maintained or lost your center, what you learned about holding consciousness in group settings. Jung observed that conscious individuals need structured limits for unconscious interactions, which he called psychological dosage management. Determine your threshold, perhaps 3 hours of performative social interaction before needing authentic connection, 2 hours of work meetings before requiring solitude for integration or specific limits on time spent with family members who pressure you to return to old patterns. This isn't avoidance, but conscious energy management that allows you to engage sustainably with unconscious environments without losing your center or becoming overwhelmed by others' energy. The first pitfall is ego inflation and the prophet complex, which Jung observed as almost inevitable during early stages of conscious development. After experiencing genuine Carl Jung shadow work insights, the ego often attempts to co-opt the spiritual experience, creating a new identity around being more evolved, chosen to awaken others, or specially gifted with consciousness others lack. This manifests as frequently correcting others' perspectives, feeling frustrated with others' unconsciousness, using spiritual language to establish superiority, or believing you're meant to save or awaken others. Nancy experienced this when she began seeing her job as a mission to awaken her colleagues, to authentic marketing, unconsciously positioning herself as more conscious than people who hadn't questioned the ethics of manipulation in advertising. Jung warned that spiritual inflation is particularly seductive because it contains genuine insights mixed with ego aggrandizement. You have had real experiences and gained authentic understanding, but the ego uses these legitimate spiritual developments to create a new form of specialness. The corrective involves practicing Jung's active humility, weekly identifying one area where you are still unconscious, still learning, still growing. Notice when you feel superior to others who are struggling with issues you've worked through, recognizing that consciousness is a moment-by-moment choice rather than a permanent achievement. Remember that your spiritual insights were gifts rather than personal accomplishments, and that everyone is at their perfect place in their own awakening journey. Jung also recommended what he called conscious foolishness, deliberately doing things that deflate your spiritual image, allowing yourself to be seen as ordinary, imperfect, and human. Nancy began sharing her mistakes and uncertainties with colleagues instead of only offering insights, which paradoxically made her more influential because people could relate to her humanity rather than feeling intimidated by her consciousness. The second pitfall is justified withdrawal and isolation, which Jung recognized as a common response to the discomfort of being around unconscious people. Because unconscious people can feel draining, triggering, or simply difficult to relate to, you might withdraw completely, justifying isolation as spiritual necessity or self-care. Early warning signs include avoiding most social interactions, feeling superior to unconscious people, preferring books or meditation to human connection, or believing others are too asleep to understand you. Nancy went through a 6-month period where she avoided all but essential human contact, believing she was too conscious for normal relationships and that other people's energy was too heavy for her sensitive system. Jung observed that this withdrawal often masks fear of intimacy and genuine human connection. When you isolate yourself from unconscious people, you also protect yourself from the vulnerability of being seen. In your own unconsciousness, your own struggles, your own need for growth and support. The corrective is Jung's conscious relationship practice, identifying 2 to 3 people who challenge you to grow without draining your energy, then committing to regular, authentic interaction with these individuals. Use relationship as a mirror for continued growth rather than a threat to your spiritual development. Jung emphasized that individuation requires relationship because consciousness develops through interaction with others. You discover your own unconscious patterns through projection, learn about your shadow through conflict, and develop empathy through witnessing others' struggles with issues you've worked through. Complete withdrawal prevents this essential growth and can lead to what Jung called sterile consciousness, understanding without compassion, insight without humanity, transcendence without embodiment. The third pitfall is healer role addiction, where your newfound psychological insight traps you in the role of therapist, spiritual guide, or emotional caretaker for others. While helping feels noble and meaningful, Jung warned, this can become another ego trap. You begin needing others' problems to feel valuable, worthy, or special. Early warning signs include people always coming to you with problems, feeling responsible for others' growth, being exhausted, but unable to stop helping, or your identity depending on being the wise one who has all the answers. Nancy fell into this pattern when she became the unofficial therapist for her friend group, spending hours each week listening to others' problems and offering guidance which felt meaningful, but was ultimately draining her energy and preventing her from focusing on her own continued growth. Jung observed that the healer role often masks unresolved rescue fantasies and codependent patterns. You might unconsciously seek out people who need fixing because it makes you feel valuable, competent, and needed. The helping becomes about your own psychological needs rather than genuine service to others' growth. The corrective involves practicing loving detachment. When someone brings you their problems, ask yourself, are they seeking genuine support for their own growth, or are they looking for someone to manage their emotions and take responsibility for their choices? Offer presence without trying to fix advice, without attachment to whether they follow it, and support without taking responsibility for their outcomes. Remember Jung's insight that everyone's path is their own, and that your job is to model consciousness rather than create it in others. True healing happens when people take responsibility for their own growth, and your role is to support that process rather than doing the work for them. Nancy learned to respond to friends' problems with questions rather than solutions. What do you think would help you most in this situation? How do you want to handle this? What would it look like to trust your own wisdom here? This empowered others while preserving her own energy for her continued development. The fourth pitfall is overwhelm and energetic flooding, which Jung observed as particularly common for people who become more sensitive through Carl Jung's shadow work and consciousness development. As your awareness expands, you might become overwhelmed by others' emotions, environmental energy, collective unconscious patterns, or simply the intensity of perceiving reality more clearly. Early warning signs include feeling others' emotions as your own avoiding crowds, or busy places needing excessive alone time to recover from interactions, or feeling responsible for managing others' emotional states and environmental energy. Nancy experienced this when she became so sensitive to others' energy that grocery shopping became overwhelming. She could feel the cashier's depression, the anxiety of other shoppers, the stress of employees, and the collective energy of consumerism all at once. She began avoiding public places and social gatherings, not from fear, but from genuine energetic overwhelm that left her exhausted and confused about which emotions belonged to her. Jung distinguished between healthy sensitivity that serves consciousness and pathological overwhelm that prevents functioning. The corrective is Jung's psychological immunity protocol, daily practice of energetic boundaries through visualization, breathwork, and conscious separation of your energy from others. Spend 10 minutes daily imagining a protective but permeable boundary around your energy field, like a semi-permeable membrane that allows love and connection to flow while filtering out emotions and energy that aren't yours to carry. Practice what Jung called conscious shielding, not closing your heart, but maintaining clear energetic boundaries that allow you to remain sensitive without becoming overwhelmed. Additionally, develop what Jung termed integration practices for processing the increased sensitivity. After challenging interactions or overwhelming experiences, spend time in nature practice breathwork journal about what you absorbed versus what was authentically yours, or engage in physical activities that help you discharge excess energy and return to your own center. Remember that increased sensitivity is a sign of expanded consciousness, but it needs to be balanced with practical skills for managing that sensitivity in a world that isn't always conscious. As you mature in this process of gradual quitting and conscious development, Jung observed 3 types of relationships become essential for continued growth and practical functioning in the world. First are co-travelers, others also engaged in conscious individuation, who can provide mutual support without dependency, honest reflection, without judgment, and shared commitment to growth without competition. You recognize co-travelers by their comfort with paradox and complexity, their ability to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously without needing immediate resolution, and their willingness to be wrong in service of truth, rather than defending their positions to protect their ego. Co-travelers often challenge you in ways that promote growth, rather than confirming your existing beliefs or making you feel comfortable. They can witness your shadow material without being shocked or trying to fix you support your authentic expression, even when it's inconvenient for them, and engage in what Jung called conscious conflict disagreement that serves truth rather than ego protection. Nancy found her co-travelers in unexpected places, not in spiritual communities where she expected them, but among individuals who valued authenticity over appearance, growth over comfort, truth over harmony, and questions over answers. Second are self-aware containers. People who may not be as far along the conscious path, but possess natural emotional maturity, psychological stability, and what Jung called earthy wisdom. They can hold space for your authenticity without being threatened by it, offer grounded perspective when you're lost in spiritual concepts or psychological analysis, and provide practical support for your continued development. These relationships are characterized by mutual respect, emotional safety, and the ability to be genuinely yourself without performance or pretense. Self-aware containers often serve as reality checks when you're becoming too abstract or detached from practical concerns. They remind you of your humanity when you're getting lost in transcendent experiences, and they can appreciate your growth without needing to understand all the psychological concepts or spiritual frameworks you're exploring. Nancy's relationship with her neighbor, an elderly woman who had never done therapy or spiritual practice, but possessed natural wisdom and emotional maturity, became invaluable for keeping her grounded in practical reality while supporting her continued development. Third are natural mirrors individuals who reflect your unconscious patterns back to you through their reactions, conflicts, or attractions. These might be challenging relationships that trigger your shadow material, but ones that serve your growth when approached consciously rather than avoided or managed. Jung emphasized that our strongest reactions, both positive and negative, often point to our greatest growth opportunities. Natural mirrors aren't necessarily conscious themselves, but they provide opportunities for you to see your own unconscious patterns, projections, and areas needing integration. The key with natural mirror relationships is maintaining consciousness about what's being reflected rather than getting lost in the emotional reactivity or trying to change the other person. Nancy's relationship with her critical mother became a natural mirror for her own inner critic and people-pleasing patterns. Instead of avoiding her mother or trying to change her, Nancy learned to use their interactions as opportunities to practice maintaining her center while witnessing her own reactions. Remember that service from an individuated place is sustainable because it emerges from authenticity rather than obligation from wholeness, rather than emptiness from choice, rather than compulsion. You serve not because you should, but because you cannot help, but serve when you're aligned with your authentic nature. The service becomes an expression of your individuation, rather than a sacrifice of it. Carl Jung spent his lifetime documenting what we've explored today, the slow, inevitable quitting that accompanies genuine spiritual awakening. Each pattern you release isn't a loss, but a homecoming to who you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning, survival strategies, and social programming. The 7 patterns we've explored: quitting approval-seeking specialness performance, certainty blame spiritual bypassing, and isolation, represent what Jung called ego death in service of self-birth. You're not becoming someone new. You're finally becoming who you truly are. Your 24-hour integration exercise begins tonight. Identify which of the 7 quitting patterns most resonates with your current experience. Then tomorrow, notice 3 moments when your authentic self emerges naturally. The gift isn't consciousness itself. The unconscious relationship to consciousness is what creates suffering. As you learn to hold your awakening consciously with both humility and authority, you become what Jung envisioned: an individuated human being, serving collective healing through authentic presence.